Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video, and welcome to a week of reading. I'm hoping to get a lot of reading done this week. This video is very kindly sponsored by Serious Readers, who make wonderful reading light. I'll tell you a bit more about them later on in the video. So today is Monday and I have this week more or less off work. So if you're newer to this channel, my main job is that I'm a freelance editor. So I work for various publishers. They send me a book and I send it back, having done various things to it. So I do structural edits, line edits, copy edits, proofreads. And this week I have a week's gap between freelance projects. So I just handed something in on Friday and my next project isn't due until Monday. My plan is basically to more or less take this week off. There are some other things that I do as part of my working life that will not be stopping this week. So I'm also an author. I've had 2 historical novels published and I'm working on a 3rd at the moment, so I'm not going to stop writing this week. And in fact, one day this week I'm hoping to go to the British Library and do a bit of historical research for my next book. I've been meaning to go back to the British Library for ages, and it's just been hard to find like a full day to do that, so I'll do that at some point this week. And I also have some sort of freelance and writing admin stuff that I need to do this week, and plenty of booktube stuff that I need to do this week. A usual day for me is often sort of 1 or 2 hours of writing, 6 hours of freelance editing, and 1 hour of booktube. So this week I will still be doing like 1 or 2 hours of writing a day and probably 1 to 3 or 4 hours of booktube stuff a day, because I'm going to try and use this week to get a bit ahead on booktube. But that still leaves me with many hours a day. So I thought what I would try and do is sort of treat reading like it is my freelance work this week. So instead of spending 6 hours a day doing freelance editing, I will try and spend like 5 or 6 hours a day reading. As I said, there is one day I want to go to the British Library this week, but that still leaves me with 4 days where I hope I can get a lot of reading done. If you saw my end of the year TBR video from a few weeks ago, you know that there are many books that I want to read before the end of the year. So I thought having a lot of dedicated reading time this week would be really fun, really relaxing, and also help me tick lots of books off my goals and my end of the year TBR. So in terms of where I'm going to start, one thing I'm really determined to finish this week is this. This is The Lifted Veil, Women's 19th Century Short Stories. This is a collection of short stories and I've read quite a lot of them now. Some of them I had read before getting this edition, some of them I have read more recently. So I have 4 stories left, so I thought I would just read 1 a day, and that means I should finish that this week. So that's definitely something I want to be starting today. I will read, I guess, the first story in here that I haven't read, which is Maurice or the Fisher's Cot by Mary Shelley, which will be really exciting to read. The only thing I've read by Mary Shelley is Frankenstein, which I loved, but I would be keen to read something else by her, so that'll be exciting. And then the other thing I thought I would pick up today is this. This is Novelist as a Vocation by Haruki Murakami. This is a non-fiction book about being a novelist, and it is non-fiction November, so I thought this would be a nice thing to make sure I read in November. I don't know whether this is going to be the kind of book that I want to read all in one sitting. I feel like I love to read a novel all in one sitting, but a non-fiction book is sometimes not always so good in one sitting. So I think I'll start it and see how I go. I am also currently listening to a non-fiction book on audiobook, The Anglo-Saxons by Mark Morris, which I'm really hoping I will finish off this week. That's enough ramble for now, and I will crack on with some reading. Hello again, it's now later on in the day and I've just finished reading Novelist as a Vocation, which overall I really enjoyed. I feel like this is probably the thing by Murakami I've enjoyed the most since I read Norwegian Wood, which was many, many years ago now. In general, I find Murakami's fiction quite hit or miss. Basically, I really like his writing style, but some of his books, such as Kafka on the Shore are a bit too weird for me, and I also in general find his depiction of his female characters to be quite derogatory, I suppose. Maybe that's the best word. But I was kind of curious to read his non-fiction book that has been on my TBR for a long time, and I did actually find this really interesting. This is a collection of non-fiction essays about various aspects of writing and being a writer. I think the things I found kind of most interesting were the things that kind of told me more about sort of the general literary scene in Japan, and also kind of his transition from being a writer who was successful in Japan to being a writer who was sort of globally successful, and everything he had to say about translation was really interesting. And it was quite a quick read. Like, I did read it all in one go. I didn't feel the need to switch over to a novel. I would say that this is probably a more interesting book to read if you either are a big Murakami fan or if you write. I feel like if you don't fit into either of those camps, then it's probably not going to be a very exciting book for you. But I did find it quite interesting. And then I also read Maurice or the Fisher's Cot by Mary Shelley from The Lifted Veil, which was quite an enjoyable short story. I liked it and I enjoyed reading it. And Mary Shelley's writing is really beautiful, but the story is quite short, and I feel like it doesn't feel necessarily hugely accomplished or necessarily hugely detailed, I suppose. I feel like there are probably more exciting things by Mary Shelley to be read, such as Frankenstein, but also other of her longer works, which at some point I will get to. And then I was having a think about what to read next, and I think I might pick up this. This is The Woman Who Had Two Navels and Tales of the Tropical Gothic by Nick Joaquin. This is a novel from the Philippines, from the mid-20th century, I want to say. This has been on my shelf for a few months. I've been meaning to read it for a while. I'm pretty sure I've had it on a TBR or two before, and I think this will be a really intriguing read. So hopefully I will start this evening and get further through this tomorrow. It's a bit heftier. It's sort of 400 pages, and Penguin Classics text is never that big. So this might take me a couple of days, but I feel like this will be a really interesting read. So it'd be good to get to it this week if I can, alongside some other things. Hello again. So it's now Tuesday evening and I'm about halfway through this book. So this is more of a collection of short stories than I was expecting it to be. I had in my head from the title that it was like two novellas. I don't know why, because Tales of the Tropical Gothic sounds like short stories, doesn't it? I don't know why I thought there were two novellas, but anyway, my favourite story so far has been Guardia d'Honor, which I really enjoyed. In general, I'm finding there's a really interesting mix of sort of like some speculative and magical elements with some realist elements. In some stories, there is sort of a dose of sexism, and it's sort of hard to tell whether that is there to make a particular point about sexism within society at the time or just there. It's from the 1950s, so it's not sort of hugely surprising, but in a few stories that's kind of combined with like a real sense of violence, which is quite unpleasant to read. So I'm not sure what to make of that yet. So some of the stories I'm finding a little bit uncomfortable, but I am finding them really, really interesting. So looking forward to carrying on with this. I think this will be a really interesting read. But before I get on with my evening's reading, I wanted to take a moment to tell you about Serious Readers, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Serious Readers have sponsored quite a few of my videos this autumn, winter time, which is very, very lovely. So Serious Readers make wonderful reading lights like this one. This is my high definition Serious light that I've had for about 2 years now and I use all the time. It is very, very flexible and versatile, which I really like. It's also dimmable, and I have a diffusion ring, so you can see the beam of light is quite different depending on whether you have the ring on or not. So without the ring, the light is more sort of like direct in one beam, and then with the diffuser ring on, the light is still quite direct, but it's just like a little bit more spread out and softened, which is sometimes quite nice. I usually use it with the diffuser ring on, but when I'm vlogging, I tend to take the diffuser ring off because my camera does not like the diffuser ring so much, but there we go. I, as I said, have had my Sirius light for 2 years. I use it all the time. It is really great. So if anyone's interested in serious readers and is in need of a good reading light, I will leave some links down below. I currently have an offer code active, so if you use the code KT24 or in capital letters, you can get £100 off high definition lights and free UK delivery. And as I said, the lights really are fantastic. I use it all the time, as you will see from all my reading vlogs. So that was all for now. I'm going to crack on with some reading and I'll check in again soon. Hello again. So it is now Wednesday and today has not been a very productive day at all in terms of reading or anything else. I woke up with a terrible migraine this morning and spent most of the day lying in bed listening to audiobooks. So there we go. I did get through some audiobooks though. I listened to The Chimes by Charles Dickens, which is the next book for the Christmas Dickens read along, one of Dickens's Christmas novellas. So I really enjoyed that quite a lot more than I had previously actually. Previously, The Chimes has always been my least favourite Dickens Christmas novella, and I think it probably still is, though I'll see what I think of the rest as I reread them. But I actually got quite a lot more out of it this time, which was nice. I still think there are some elements in it that aren't quite working, or where the pacing is a bit off, or where like you can see Charles Dickens trying to recreate A Christmas Carol and not quite managing it. Does the premise work as well? Not necessarily, but I did still quite enjoy it. So The Chimes is a sort of ghostly New Year's tale about this man called Toby, who has lost his faith in the world. He doesn't believe in hope. He doesn't believe that people are good, and he believes that, you know, no good can come of anything. And then one night, the goblins of the Chimes of the local church summon him to show him visions of the future to try and bring back his hope in humanity. I enjoyed the Chimes quite a lot more than I had previously, and I found it very emotional and moving. That may have just been because I was feeling quite terrible at the time. I feel like that probably increased the emotion of the ending of the Chimes, but anyway. And then I also listened to a bit more of The Anglo-Saxons by Mark Morris as well. I'm really enjoying that. Really, really interesting, well researched, well set out history. And I think Mark Morris is quite good at telling you like where we don't know things, because, you know, looking at the Anglo-Saxon period, there's so much we don't know, and I feel like Mark Morris is quite good at telling you, you know, we think this is what happened but we don't know for certain, or we have this evidence but this contradicts with this evidence, or we have this historical source that says this but this might not be true. Like, I feel like he's quite good at explaining the gaps in the knowledge, which is nice. So yes, today has mostly been taken up with a migraine and feeling rubbish, but I do feel quite a bit better now. So I have been sitting on the sofa doing a little bit of physical reading. There were lots of other things I wanted to do today, and I have some videos to edit and stuff, but I didn't really feel like I could stand to look at a screen for that long. And then I'm meant to be going to a literary event tonight, the Historical Writers Association like awards ceremony. I was shortlisted for the debut prize last year, and I went along to that event because I'd been shortlisted and it was really, really fun. So I wanted to go along this year. I really, really want to go, but I still have a bit of a headache. So I'm going to see how I feel in the next couple of hours, and then I may or may not go to the event. I hate migraines. They're so frustrating. And I always feel like even when my main headache and like light sensitiveness is gone, I always still feel like quite drained. So I don't know. If I feel better in a few hours time, I might go along to the HWA event because I really do want to go, and if I do go, I'll try and take a couple of little clips and put it in. But if all you see after this is just footage of me sat on the sofa reading, then that probably means I didn't feel quite up to going. Hello again. So it is now Thursday morning, and I wanted to check in terms of how my reading is going. So I finished off reading The Woman Who Had Two Navels and Other Stories, and I have such complicated feelings about this collection. So this book is mostly a collection of short stories, but the final thing in this book, the last sort of 100 pages, is a play called A Portrait of the Artist as Filipino. And basically, I didn't really like the short stories that much. I liked a few of them, but I sort of generally struggled with the short stories a bit. There were quite a few stories that were very surreal and weird in a way that I don't tend to love. And also, there were quite a few stories where I didn't feel like I'd got it. Like, I feel like there was something I was missing or something I didn't quite understand. But then I read the play, and the play was amazing, like absolutely fantastic, like such a wonderful, wonderful play. Really fantastic, really powerful, really moving, kind of had a sort of Chekhov like feel to it. I think partly because everyone was a bit sort of lonely and despairing, and there was a real sort of sense of loss of hope and a sense that there had been hope in the past and now the hope is gone, and it was just fantastic. It's this amazing family drama set in 1941, sort of when World War II is happening, but before it's come to the Philippines. So everyone knows that a war is coming, and there are like practice blackouts and practice air raids. They're not in danger, but there's this sense of like looming threat. And we're following these two sisters who are sort of in their very early 40s, and they live in this big old house with their father who is unwell, and they've sort of run out of money. They can't really afford to keep living in this house. And their father, a year ago, painted this painting called A Portrait of the Artist as Filipino. And this painting sort of has this influence over everyone who sees it, and people can't decide whether they think it's beautiful or hideous. It's really sort of strange and mysterious, and lots of people want to buy this painting, but the two sisters feel like they can't possibly sell it. It will be a betrayal of their father, but they also don't have any money, so maybe they might have to. And I just feel like it was such a clever play. I thought the characterization was great, a really sort of dramatic, wonderful play. And I also loved the fact that the painting, which is sort of, you know, so important to the play, the idea is that it is on the like fourth wall. So the painting is between the stage and the audience, as it were. So every time the characters are looking out to the audience, they're looking at the painting, and the audience never sees the painting. You hear everything about this painting, and you get lots of little details from what the characters say about it, but you never see the painting. It's not a part of the set. And I just thought that was genius too. And I just thought it was amazing. And having said that, I was struggling with sort of some sexist elements in some of the short stories. I felt like the female characters in the play were fantastically drawn. So I have such mixed feelings here, because I basically feel like the short stories were sort of like 2-3 stars for me, and then the play was like 5 stars. One of my favourite classics of the year kind of thing. So complicated feelings, but I'm very glad I read this, and yeah, the play was amazing. And then meanwhile, I have been reading a bit more of The Lifted Veil. So I finished off reading The Fatal Marriage by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, which I enjoyed. Good, sensational drama. Not quite as fun and engaging and compelling as a full-length Mary Elizabeth Braddon, but I did still really enjoy it. And then I also read The China Bowl by Charlotte Mew. This is basically the story of a mother, her son, and her new daughter-in-law, and all the drama between them. It was quite a complicated, strange story. I'm not sure if I agreed with Charlotte Mew's like assessment of the situation between the characters, if that makes sense. But I did find it quite interesting. So I've now only got one story left in The Lifted Veil to read, and then I will be done with this massive book. And that is The Green Dwarf by Charlotte Bronte. That is one of the longest stories in the book. I think it's about 100 pages, but maybe I will start that today and finish it tomorrow. And then meanwhile, I am going to start something else. And I think having spent quite a lot of time reading this, that took me a bit longer than I expected. I think I'm going to pick up something really short next, and I might pick up this. This is The Kawagama Food Detectives by Hisashi Kashiwa. And this is translated from the Japanese by Jessie Kirkwood. I've heard really good things about this. It's pretty short, and I think it'll be enjoyable, so I definitely want to read that next. But I am also going to spend quite a lot of time doing BookTube stuff today, because I didn't manage to do any of the BookTube stuff I wanted to do yesterday because I just felt awful. But I'm feeling much better today. Still have like a vague lingering headache. I feel like sometimes migraines just like drain my brain for several days afterwards, but I'm definitely feeling prepared to film and edit some videos and do some more reading. Realised I forgot to talk about the HWA event I went to last night, which I hopefully took a couple of clips from, but I think probably all of about like 20 seconds. I'm really glad the migraine dissipated and I felt well enough to go, because it was a really fun event. Chatted to lots of authors, some of whom I knew, some of whom I didn't know. I'll leave some links down below if you're interested in the HWA prize and you want to see who the winners are. I read a few books from the debut shortlist, but I hadn't read anything from the gold shortlist or the non-fiction prize shortlist. There were 3 books from the debut prize that I had read and absolutely loved. The Beholders by Hester Musson, The Revels by Stacey Thomas, and The Maiden by Kate Foster. I was sad that the winner wasn't one of those 3 because I had loved those books so much, but it was a really lovely event to go to. I had such a good time. Anyway, I feel like I have been rambling for ages, so I will stop now. I'm gonna go do some video editing, and then I will get back to you some reading later on in the day. Hello again, it's Thursday evening and I've just finished reading The Kawagama Food Detectives, which overall I quite liked. This was a really soothing, relaxing read, I would say. Really enjoyable with some really moving elements to it. There was one story in particular I found very moving. It's one of those sort of novels in stories. So we have sort of 6 chapters or stories in which we follow 6 customers coming to this restaurant, and asking the proprietors of the restaurant to recreate a dish from their sort of personal past. And each chapter, each story has sort of 2 sections. One with the customer arriving and sort of giving their memories of this dish, and then the second with them coming back to the restaurant to be made the dish. I will say that this is very repetitive, and maybe I shouldn't have read it all in one day, but I feel like by the time the repetition was bothering me, I was already halfway through and I was enjoying it. The repetition is kind of like relaxing and comforting in a way, but I do think it is quite repetitive, so that is worth being aware of. Like, each chapter has sort of exactly the same structure. I feel like this is now probably the 3rd sort of Japanese novel I've read in this sort of style and form. The other 2 being Before the Coffee Gets Cold and What You Are Looking For Is in the Library. And I feel like of the 3 of them, the strongest one was probably What You Are Looking For Is at the Library. I did still really enjoy this too, and I did enjoy Before the Coffee Gets Cold at the time, though I can't really remember it very well now. But that kind of style of book can feel a little bit repetitive, and this one was more repetitive than the others. So I kind of enjoyed the reading experience, and it was a very smooth, quick read, but I do feel like I could have done with more development of the recurring characters or more of a plot line running beneath it. I don't know, mixed feelings. I did overall enjoy it. This evening I'm gonna start the last story I have to read in the Lifted Veil, The Green Dwarf by Charlotte Bronte, which I will start today and then I will read a bit more of tomorrow. But tomorrow I'm also going to go to the British Library and do some historical research, which will be nice. I'm not going to take this massive book out with me on my journey to the British Library, so I might start a new book tomorrow too. And I was thinking I might pick up The Darkest Rising by Susan Cooper, because this library book is due back soon. And this is a children's classic from the 1960s, 1970s, so I don't think this will take me too long. Yeah, 1973 this one's from. I'm sort of undecided about whether I'm going to end this vlog tomorrow or on Sunday, but maybe I will edit some of the clips I have so far and see how long it is, and then we'll make the decision based on that. Regardless, I am determined to finish the Lifted Veil before I wrap up this vlog, so yes, that's all for now, and I'll check in again very soon. It is a Monday again, and I think it is time to wrap up this vlog. I didn't actually manage to film anything over the weekend, but I did manage to finish off reading two things. So I finished off reading the final story I had to read in The Lifted Veil, which was The Green Dwarf by Charlotte Bronte, which was fine. I've read a few bits and pieces of Charlotte Bronte's juvenilia before, like her stories set in the fictional world that she created with her siblings, and I always find the stories quite confusing and like not very engaging, so that wasn't a great story to end on with The Lifted Veil. In general, I'd say this has been like a mixed collection, and I think that's partly because I read a few of the stories before, and some of the ones that I had read before and that I had reread quite recently, which I didn't read again, are probably the best stories in the collection, like The Grey Woman by Elizabeth Gaskell, like The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, like A Pair of Silk Stockings by Kate Chopin. They're all fantastic stories. I think my favourite new to me stories in this collection, which I didn't read this week, are A Whisper in the Dark by Louisa May Alcott and Souls Belated by Edith Wharton, but I read them a couple of weeks ago, so the stories I read from this week were not the best, but there we go. I'm glad that I finally finished this big book that's been on my TBR for a while. And then I also finished listening to The Anglo-Saxons by Mark Morris, which I really enjoyed. Really, really interesting history book. As I said at some point earlier on in the week, I feel like Mark Morris does a really good job of making the stories engaging and giving you lots of information while also telling you like the gaps in knowledge and kind of when we don't know certain things and how they happened exactly. Basically, the way the book is structured is we kind of follow various individuals, mostly kings and bishops, and kind of look at a certain bit of the history of the Anglo-Saxon period through that historical figures movement, which I think is a really good, accessible way to do it. So overall, I really enjoyed it, a really interesting history book. And then meanwhile, I also started The Dark is Rising. I'm about halfway through this, but I thought I would wrap up this vlog here before I finish this, because I'm not sure when I'm going to manage to finish this off, but I'm really enjoying this so far. I feel like Susan Cooper is such a great writer, and the Dark is Rising series is really fun so far. This is the second book in the series, and we're not following the same characters as in the first book, but there are a few kind of recurring characters, and the sort of menace, I suppose, the sort of magical element to the book is kind of the same, and it's really, really good. This is also really festive. It's set like over the Christmas period, which is quite fun. I am reading it a little bit early because it's November, but it's due back to the library, so there we go. Really enjoying this so far. So there we go, a bit of a mixed reading week. I'm really glad that I managed to finish off The Lifted Veil, and I also read a couple of other things from my physical TBR. Not as much as I would have liked, but there we go. I read Novelist as a Vocation, The Woman Who Had Two Navels and Other Stories, and The Kawagama Food Detectives, and I also listened to on audiobook The Chimes by Charles Dickens and The Anglo-Saxons by Mark Morris. So I didn't get as much read as I wanted to last week, but I think between having lots of booktube stuff and like life stuff that I was doing, and also like having a day where I had a migraine and didn't achieve anything, you know, that's fine. I'm still really pleased with what I read. I think my favourite thing I read this week by far was probably the play from this edition, which is A Portrait of the Artist is Filipino, which was fantastic, like such an amazing play. I'm not sure how much I would recommend Nick Joaquin's short stories, but I would really recommend the play. So yes, that's how my week of reading went. I will wrap up the video now. Thanks again to Serious Readers for sponsoring this video, and yeah, I hope you have enjoyed watching. Do let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. That's all for now, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.